We feel the investigation continues to be on track and is progressing toward finding Kyron. We remain confident in the actions and constant commitment of law enforcement in the mission to find our son. Our goals are to expedite the search for Kyron, to bring him home as quickly as possible, and to bring justice to any person responsible for his disappearance. We believe their goals remain the same as ours and are confident that they will bring him home soon. We are still very hopeful that with additional tips each day and their diligent actions, that is what will lead them to Kyron. We love you, Kyron. Never give up hope. We are all coming to get you, to bring you home. Thank you.
A 7-year-old boy just vanished, and it seemed like he disappeared without a trace. His name was Kyron Horman, and on June 4th, 2010, he arrived at Skyline Elementary School in Portland, Oregon, excited for a big day.
The afternoon of June 4th, that's when people first started looking for Kyron.
Skyline second grader Kyron Horman did not arrive home from school today.
It is a scramble. By that time, he had been missing for hours.
Family didn't know that he wasn't at school. His teacher didn't see him, so we are feeling like we are behind the 8 ball here.
By nightfall, there is no sign of Kyron. And in the days that follow, the search intensifies.
Hours went by, and no one knew he was missing until the end of the school day. Terry waited for Kyron at the bus stop, but he never arrived. She rushed home, panicked, and called the school, only to hear that he hadn't been seen in class at all that day. That's when reality hit. Kyron was gone. From that point, his family and the entire community were pulled into a desperate search, hoping to find answers in a case that would only grow stranger with each passing day. June 4th, 2010, started off as a big day for young Kyron Horman. This wasn't just any regular Friday. Skyline Elementary in Northwest Portland was buzzing with excitement for the annual science fair. And for 7-year-old Kyron, this was the highlight of his week. He had been looking forward to showing off his science project to everyone, especially his stepmother, Terry Moulton Horman. It was a project he'd been working on with so much energy and joy. His mom and even his grandma pitched in to make it something special, and he was proud to bring it to life. Instead of hopping on his usual school bus that morning, he rode with Terry in her car, thrilled to get to school a little early. They drove down the familiar route, Cornelius Pass Road, chatting along the way. By around 8 a.m., they arrived at Skyline Elementary. The school was just opening its doors early for the science fair, a treat for students and parents alike who were eager to check out all the projects set up across the classrooms. When they walked into his classroom, Kyron was practically glowing. He quickly dropped off his coat and backpack and, with a smile, showed Terry his project on the red-eyed tree frog. It was his pride and joy, the culmination of so much effort and curiosity. Terry took a quick photo of him standing in front of the display, a snapshot of his excitement, something he'd later share on Facebook. You could tell just how happy he was, standing there with that project. Once they had admired his exhibit, the two wandered around to see what other kids had created. Skyline Elementary was bustling that morning. Around 300 students had brought in projects, and nearly every classroom had something interesting to showcase. Kyron and Terry took their time, exploring the displays on each desk. They even ran into a few familiar faces, classmates, parents, teachers, everyone sharing in the excitement of the fair. It was a special moment, one of those rare mornings where the whole school felt like it was coming together in a celebration of curiosity and learning. Now, Terry was no stranger to Skyline. She often volunteered at the school, lending a hand with activities and working closely with Kyron's teacher, Christina Porter. She knew the place like the back of her hand, and on that morning, Christina spotted Kyron with his stepmom in the classroom, both of them engrossed in the fair. Another teacher recalled catching a glimpse of him in another classroom at some point. Kyron was everywhere, soaking up the excitement. As the clock approached 8:45 a.m., the bell rang, signaling the start of the regular school day. The science fair might have been a special occasion, but soon classes would begin as usual. Terry walked with Kyron down the hall, close to his classroom. When they reached a point near the classroom door, Kyron looked up with a confident smile and mentioned he was heading back inside. They shared a quick wave, one of those everyday goodbyes. Terry watched as he walked off toward his classroom, thinking everything was just like any other school day. But then, that's where things take a strange turn.
7-year-old Kyron Horman was last seen after his stepmother, Terry Horman,
there's his picture,
drove him to school for one of the biggest days of the year, the school science fair.
The second grader at Skyline Elementary had worked hard on his project for the science fair.
This is a picture she took of the second grader with his project, the red-eyed tree frog.
After touring exhibits together, they say goodbye in the school hallway. She leaves for home. Kyron heads toward his classroom.
It's the last time anyone remembers seeing him.
So after that goodbye, everyone thought Kyron would be safe and sound in his classroom. The kids at Skyline Elementary were supposed to get into small groups, each one led by an adult chaperone, and tour the science fair displays together. It was all planned out. After the fair, they'd head back to their classrooms for roll call, just like usual. But when the teachers started taking attendance, Kyron was missing. He hadn't come back with the rest of his group. Meanwhile, Terry went about her day, completely unaware of the confusion unfolding back at the school. She took care of her usual errands, ran around handling household tasks, and did everything she'd normally do on any other day. As we said before, Terry used to be an elementary school teacher herself, and she even worked as a substitute at different schools here and there. But lately, she was mostly at home with her young daughter. For years now, she'd been a huge part of Kyron's life, raising him since he was just a baby. She and Kyron's father, Kyron Horman, had been together for quite a while, almost 8 years, married for around 5. They also had an 18-month-old little girl who kept Terry busy at home. She'd been there for Kyron since he was tiny, as much of a mom to him as his biological mother, Desiree.
Terry Horman has raised Kyron since he was very young, helping Kyron Horman after his divorce with Kyron's mother, Desiree. Terry and Kyron married in Hawaii in 2007 and soon had a daughter of their own together.
Kyron was supposed to ride the school bus home that afternoon, like he did every other day. Terry showed up at the bus stop around 3:30 p.m., waiting for him to hop off, but he didn't come off the bus. The driver told her Kyron wasn't on board, and that's when Terry's heart started pounding. She didn't waste a second. She rushed home, grabbed the phone, and called the school. That's when she learned something that sent a chill down her spine. Kyron had been marked absent all day. He hadn't shown up in class, and no one had seen him since that morning at the science fair.
Multnomah County Sheriff's deputies say his stepmother took this picture of Kyron when they were at the science fair. As she left at 8:45 in the morning, she says Kyron was walking towards his classroom. But a Portland Public Schools spokesperson says Kyron was marked absent by his teacher when class started at 10 a.m.
Not sure really what happened. It's kind of concerning because you hear the schools, they're supposed to call when your kid's absent, and they didn't, and that kind of concerns me.
In that moment, everything turned serious. Terry dialed 911, launching a massive search operation. Officers, search and rescue teams, and even the FBI quickly got involved, covering every inch of ground, retracing Kyron's steps, and trying to fill in the gaps from the 6 hours he'd been missing. Kyron's biological mother, Desiree, and her husband heard the news and raced over as soon as they could, joining hundreds of volunteers in the search for Kyron. Desiree was filled with worry and had a sick feeling in her gut. She knew her son. He wouldn't just leave on his own. Kyron struggled to see more than a few feet in front of him without his glasses, and he always had a hard time finding his way in unfamiliar places. Desiree was convinced something terrible had happened. She thought about the crowds at the science fair, wondering if someone had taken him right under everyone's noses. The idea haunted her, and she held on to the thought that Kyron would never willingly wander off alone. After that, the search continued, stretching through the dense forests and far beyond. Now, Skyline Elementary might be in Portland, but it's not in a busy, crowded part of town like most people would think. The school actually sits on the edge of the city, in one of the most remote areas around, right on the boundary between open farmland and miles of deep forest. To the south, there are some farmlands, and eventually suburbs start to appear. But to the north, it's just thick, untouched woods that stretch for miles. And these aren't just any woods either.
Search crews made their strongest push yet, with hundreds of volunteers from around the state joining the search for Kyron Horman.
We need a clue. We need that aha.
This is the kind of terrain searchers are having to comb through: tall grasses, dense vegetation, and steep slopes. It makes for a slow and tedious process.
Portland's Forest Park is right near there, and it's one of the biggest urban parks in the whole country. For comparison, it's 6 times the size of Central Park in New York. While part of Forest Park is close to downtown Portland, it goes on, with some areas so hidden that it's practically like being in the wilderness. A father and his daughter once managed to live out there in a handmade home for 4 years without anyone noticing. It's just that isolated. And Skyline Elementary sits even further north and west, past the park's most remote parts. It's the kind of landscape where if you don't know your way around, you could get lost fast. As the days went by, people began to wonder if it was even possible that a stranger could have taken Kyron from this remote place. 2 private investigators, both seasoned in cases like this, weighed in with their own thoughts. They did not believe that a stranger was likely involved. One of them, a criminal profiler, felt that something about the situation just didn't add up. Kyron was a smart kid. He was proud of his work and his project, and everyone knew how excited he was about that science fair. It was difficult to believe he would have just wandered off on his own. In their opinion, if Kyron left with someone, it had to be someone he trusted, someone close, a family member, or maybe a friend of the family. They didn't have any direct involvement in the case, but they'd seen enough of these situations to know that when a child just disappears like that, without a trace, it's often someone they know. And with all the thick forest surrounding the area, it made sense that if he went with anyone, it was probably a familiar face. But despite all the theories, the detectives didn't find any solid clue.
From day one, the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office has worked in close partnership with the Multnomah County District Attorney's Office, the FBI, and other agencies to find Kyron.
As parents, we can't imagine the pain and struggle Kyron's family has experienced and continues to experience without him.
And that's why we have never given up or slowed down in trying to find Kyron. Our detectives continue to review tips and evidence. We continue to collaborate with our partners and to utilize the latest in forensic science and technology to help generate and develop new leads. Kyron, we will never stop looking for you. You have our word.
As the search went on, the authorities started questioning everyone who might know something, anyone who could point them in the right direction. And, of course, that included Terry Horman, who was the last person to have seen Kyron that day at the science fair. As they dug deeper, they decided to give her a lie detector test, hoping to get some clear answers. But things didn't go as planned. Terry didn't pass the test. She later mentioned that she had a hearing issue that affected her responses, suggesting that maybe she hadn't understood all the questions clearly.
Stepmom Terry Horman has only grown over the years. She's always denied involvement. She's never been charged. She did fail lie detector tests during the investigation.
She dropped him off at school the day he went missing, and friends say she was scheduled to take a second lie detector test last weekend. But so far, police are not calling her a suspect or a person of interest in the case.
Desiree, Kyron's mother, didn't buy it for a second. She'd heard about how carefully those polygraph exams are set up, and about how they make sure everything's clear and comfortable for the person taking it. From her perspective, Terry had no issue hearing the questions, and Desiree couldn't shake the feeling that something about Terry's behavior was off.
When Terry came in from failing one of the polygraphs, she was visibly shaken by it, and she was scrambling to try and justify herself. She's bothered by it. Not the same way I think that normal people would be, just like in a frenzy. It got even more uncomfortable. She failed the second polygraph.
A second?
Yes.
With the FBI?
Yes. And they were able to get to another version of her timeline through that polygraph, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so as a result, we were concerned at that point. Tony said to me, they're not clearing her off their list. There's something wrong.
She started questioning things, even asking Kane what was really going on in their household. But all he could do was offer an apology, leaving Desiree with more questions than answers. Then, more unsettling information came out. Investigators came across emails Terry had sent to a friend. In one of those messages, she apparently vented her frustrations, blaming Kyron for the problems in her marriage with Kane. It wasn't just about little annoyances. She seemed to have a lot of resentment toward Kyron, seeing him as a source of stress and tension in the household. Tony felt that this email said a lot about what was going on in Terry's mind. To him, it painted a picture of a woman who was growing more and more frustrated and who saw Kyron as a problem, even as something to be rid of. It was difficult to hear, but for Desiree and Tony, it made everything feel more real. All those little suspicions and gut feelings seemed to connect, giving them even more reason to feel that something wasn't right. So after that, things took an even darker turn. By late June of 2010, right in the middle of the search for Kyron, Kyron Horman learned something that changed everything. Investigators told him that Terry had tried to hire their landscaper, a man named Rodolfo Sanchez, to kill him. According to Sanchez, Terry had offered him a substantial sum to go through with it, and this wasn't recent. She'd approached him with this idea back in January of that same year, 5 months before Kyron went missing. It was shocking news, and Kane could hardly believe it. Terry, on the other hand, denied everything, insisting that it wasn't true. The investigators, hoping to catch Terry in the act, convinced Sanchez to confront her while wearing an audio device. They were trying to get something solid, something that could lead to an arrest. But despite their efforts, nothing came of it. They couldn't gather any concrete evidence against her. However, the damage was done. By June 28th, Kane had filed for divorce, cutting ties with Terry and obtaining a restraining order to keep her away.
Kyron's family steps forward on a united front. We see Terry Horman consoling the boy's biological mother, Desiree Young. They all take polygraph tests, and Kyron Horman says Terry is vocal to the family about failing twice. He learns from investigators Terry had tried to enlist the help of a landscaper to kill him. He moves out with her daughter Kiara. Divorce papers are filed along with a restraining order.
It was the end of their relationship, and from that point on, Terry was only allowed supervised visits with her daughter. The police kept digging, searching for anything that might explain what had happened.
By the next day, Kyron's dad, Kane, and his birth mom, Desiree, accused the stepmom of not cooperating with the police, and Kane drops a bombshell.
I think everyone knows the fact that she's taken her two polygraphs. She has not passed those 2 polygraphs.
In August, they announced that they were on the lookout for a person who may have been sitting in Terry's truck outside Skyline Elementary on the day Kyron vanished. This mysterious individual was a possible lead, and former Multnomah County Sheriff Bruce McCain weighed in, explaining that if this second person was real, they might hold the key to what happened to Kyron after 9 a.m. on that day. But still, no one knew for sure who this person might be or if they even existed. Around July, a grand jury subpoenaed several of Terry's friends, people who had been close to her during this time, including one friend named Dee Dee Spicer. Both Desiree and Kane saw Dee Dee as someone who had stayed close to Terry, offering her support even when it didn't seem to align with the search for Kyron. Law enforcement called her in, questioning her for hours and searching her property and car. On the day Kyron disappeared, Dee Dee had been out gardening at a home along Germantown Road, close to Skyline. She couldn't account for about 3 hours of that day. Dee Dee, however, insisted she hadn't left the property. There were other strange details, too. Dee Dee had reportedly helped Terry buy a prepaid cell phone after Kane moved out. She later told the press that she stood by her friend, expressing disbelief that Terry could have done anything wrong. To Dee Dee, the idea of Terry being involved in something like this was unimaginable, and she felt for the horror Terry was going through. Still, the connection between them added another layer of mystery.
Dee Dee Spicer tells People.com that her friend Terry did nothing wrong, that she herself never left that property the day of Kyron's disappearance. What is your reaction to all of this information?
Well, here it's kind of interesting that Dee Dee Spicer would tell her story to People magazine, but yet she's unwilling to tell it to the local community here. The words that she used, by the way, in a way kind of put herself in a bind, because she's claiming that she never left this 38-acre parcel that she was gardening on that morning, and yet somehow she just knows that Terry Horman was not involved on the same morning, which of course would be impossible for her to prove. The big issue here, though, Harry, is that Dee Dee Spicer initially, when she first popped up on the public radar, she distanced herself from Terry Horman, saying she's cooperating and she's got nothing to do with Terry, etc. And now she seems to be joined at the hip as a part of the Terry Horman fan club.
By early August, the grand jury proceedings were well underway. They called in Desiree, Kane, and even the principal of Skyline Elementary to testify. But by December, the grand jury hadn't found enough evidence to indict anyone. The investigation was still on, and the costs were climbing, reaching a staggering $1.4 million by late November. Thousands of tips poured in, but the answers remained elusive. Years went by, but the case didn't fade away. In May 2017, local news reported that a secret grand jury panel was still hearing evidence about Kyron's disappearance. The case was still active, and by July, law enforcement even launched new searches along Skyline Boulevard, scouring the area once again. But, like all the efforts before, these searches turned up nothing. Despite the time that had passed and the ground they'd covered, Kyron's whereabouts remained a painful mystery. Kane moved forward with the divorce and got a restraining order against Terry. With nowhere else to go, Terry ended up moving in with her close friend, Dee Dee Spicer. Now, Dee Dee had been steady support for Terry through all of this, sticking by her side even when things looked grim. But with their close connection, authorities briefly wondered if Dee Dee could have played a part in Kyron's disappearance. Dee Dee and Terry both denied this, and despite all the suspicions, the investigation never officially named Terry as a suspect or even a person of interest. Still, Terry decided to take no chances and hired a top-notch defense attorney. It was a bold move, and only added more mystery to the story, leaving people to wonder why she felt the need for such a strong defense when she hadn't been charged. As the investigation slowed down, Desiree and her husband Tony felt they had to take matters into their own hands. They filed a civil suit against Terry, accusing her of kidnapping Kyron, hoping this legal step might force more information to come to light.
Young and her family are still fighting for Kyron. Just last Friday, she filed a $10 million civil lawsuit against Kyron's stepmother, Terry Horman, who investigators say was the last person to see Kyron alive.
I don't want Terry's money. I want Terry to face justice. She hasn't yet taken responsibility.
The lawsuit would allow Young's lawyer, Eldon Rosenthal, to subpoena witnesses, acquire documents and evidence, and peel away the mystery of what happened to Kyron.
They were desperate for answers, looking for anything that could break through the wall of silence. But in the end, Desiree had to drop the case, leaving her without any new leads and back to square one. Years passed, but Desiree's determination didn't waver. A decade after Kyron's disappearance, she made it clear she wasn't giving up. She spoke out, wishing that Terry would come forward, hoping that guilt would finally bring her to reveal the truth.
Time has come for Terry to take responsibility for what she has done. and to tell me and my family where Kyron is and how he got there.
My son is the reason I get up every day and keep on fighting to bring him home. I want to see his smile again. I want to hear his laugh. And most of all, I want to feel his hug. I will never give up.
Desiree described it as torture, not knowing what happened to her son, and she prayed Terry might finally let go of any secrets. But even with all that time that had gone by, Desiree held on to hope, promising she would keep searching for her son no matter what. As for the investigation, it stayed open but without any major developments. The Multnomah County Sheriff's Department still called it an ongoing investigation. Although there wasn't any official suspect, no descriptions, nothing concrete. But there was still one mystery that lingered: the two people who were reportedly seen sitting in Terry's truck outside Skyline Elementary the morning Kyron disappeared. Investigators hadn't found them yet, and they believe these two individuals might hold the key to cracking the case. Desiree kept searching for information, asking for anyone who'd been around the school that morning to come forward. She hoped someone might have noticed something, anything that could bring her closer to finding Kyron. And so, even though the case hadn't moved forward in years, the search went on. If you know anything about the disappearance of Kyron Horman or recall seeing anything unusual around Skyline Elementary on June 4th, 2010, please contact the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office. Every tip, no matter how small, could help bring answers to this ongoing investigation and provide peace for Kyron's family.
A lot has changed since June 4th of 2010, but our resolve to find Kyron and bring him home remains unchanged. We have a duty to Kyron, to his family, and to our community.
The Multnomah County Sheriff's Office and the Multnomah County District Attorney's Office is asking that anyone with information about the disappearance of Kyron Horman, including his current whereabouts, to come forward and contact the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office tip line or the FBI.